They say you should always speak up when you see something wrong, but they never tell you what happens after you do. My name is Jason Vu, and until recently, I was a financial analyst at a regional logistics company in Denver called Raven Freight. I wasn't anyone special, no corner office, no fancy title. I kept to myself, did my job well, and quietly hoped it would someday lead to something better. Stability, maybe. Respect. I didn't need a promotion, just peace of mind. That illusion shattered the morning I pulled up the latest quarterly vendor report. It was supposed to be routine. I was prepping financial summaries ahead of the upcoming budget meeting, cross-checking approved vendor payments with the ledger in our internal system. But one name kept popping up more often than it should have: Evermark Logistics. Not only were they showing up in multiple departments, but the invoice amounts looked bloated, almost too consistent. At first, I thought maybe I'd misread something. So I pulled data from the previous quarter, then the quarter before that, and suddenly, there it was, clear as day, a pattern of inflated payments going back nearly a year. We were paying tens of thousands more than we were supposed to, sometimes for services that didn't even happen. My heart started racing. I'd been working in finance long enough to recognize when something smelled off. But this wasn't a typo or someone approving a payment too quickly. This was systematic, deliberate, and covered up. I followed protocol, or at least, I tried to. The first person I spoke to was my direct supervisor, Sandra. She was usually sharp and by the book. But the moment I brought it up, her demeanor changed. Her smile thinned. "Jason, I appreciate your attention to detail," she said slowly, "but you really shouldn't dig too deep into certain accounts. Some things are above your pay grade. That's corporate speak for shut up and look the other way." I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying her tone, the forced calmness, the way she didn't even ask to see the report. So I did what I believed was right. I filed a formal report through our internal compliance portal, the anonymous one they always bragged about during ethics training. I included a breakdown of suspicious invoices, digital signatures that didn't match, vendor history, and payment timelines. I also saved a copy to my personal drive. I wasn't being paranoid, just cautious. At the time, I didn't expect a parade or a medal, but I did expect someone to take it seriously. For a few days, everything seemed normal. Too normal. Then, the shift started. People began avoiding me. Conversations in the break room would stop when I walked in. Emails I used to get, updates, project notes, even group calendar invites, stopped arriving. I thought maybe it was in my head until one of the senior analysts, Paul, made a joke loud enough for me to hear. "Careful what you say around Jason. He might be taking notes for HR." It wasn't just a joke. It was a warning and a label. The next week, I found out why. A friend in IT tipped me off after hours. The fraud didn't just implicate some mid-level manager. It led to our CFO, 2 board members, and a shell company they controlled under the name Evermark. They'd been rerouting company funds into personal accounts, dressed up as vendor payments. My report had landed squarely in the center of a power structure built on lies. And instead of cleaning house, the company buried the issue. HR called me in for a performance review. Suddenly, my work was being questioned. Missed details, attitude problems, and unwillingness to collaborate. It was laughable, but also terrifying. They were building a paper trail against me. And just like that, I wasn't Jason the analyst anymore. I was Jason the whistleblower. Jason the office enemy. And I hadn't even begun to fight back. I thought the worst had passed once I filed the report. I was wrong. After the whispers and cold shoulders, the retaliation became more strategic. First came the reassignments, subtle but targeted. Projects I had led for over a year were now reshuffled to other analysts. Sandra told me it was part of a new collaboration structure, but it felt more like a calculated move to cut me off from anything that mattered. Then came the IT restrictions. One Monday morning, I logged into my dashboard only to find half my access had been revoked. No email archives. No vendor database. No financial logs prior to the current quarter. When I raised it to our IT help desk, they said it was an internal security measure. It wasn't. It was damage control. They were erasing my access to the past, their past. I tried to keep my head down and stay focused, but when the performance review came, I knew it was a setup. Sandra handed me the report with that same fake corporate smile, but I could see the knife beneath it. "We're concerned about your attitude, Jason," she said. "You've become difficult to work with. People don't feel comfortable collaborating with you anymore." Comfortable? They were terrified of being seen talking to me. I wasn't surprised when I got pulled into a second meeting, this time with HR and legal present. They called it a check-in, but I could feel the tone shift the moment I stepped into the room. "We're here to talk about alignment," the HR rep said with rehearsed sympathy. "Your behavior has raised concerns." "What behavior? Reporting financial crime?" They were trying to build a case. Slowly, carefully. They didn't want to fire me outright. That would be too obvious. No, they wanted to push me to quit. Make me frustrated enough to walk out, so they could say I was the problem all along. But I wasn't going anywhere. Because what they didn't know was that I wasn't just documenting fraud anymore. I was now documenting them. Every HR email, every calendar reschedule, every removed project. Every time Sandra gave someone else credit for work I did, I logged it. I was building my own file, and it was thick. One night, around 8 p.m., when the office was mostly empty, I got a call. Blocked number. Male voice. Low. Shaky. "You don't know me," he said. "But I work in procurement. I saw what you flagged. You're right, and you're not the only one they're burying. Be careful." Then the line went dead. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From rage. Because this wasn't just fraud. It was a machine built to silence people like me. A machine with years of practice. But I wasn't about to become another name it chewed up and spit out. I made one more decision that night. One they didn't see coming. I called an external auditor. Not through the company. Not through a hotline. Directly. Privately. Legally. And I gave them everything. It only took 1 week. 1 week after I submitted the entire file, dates, screenshots, records, names, to the independent auditor, things began to shift. Not immediately, not explosively, but subtly. Like the rumble of a distant storm rolling in. On the surface, everything was calm. Too calm. I wasn't hearing back from the auditor, which made me nervous. But I knew this game was bigger than me now. I'd passed the torch to someone who had real authority, someone outside the company's grip. I just had to survive long enough to see it all unfold. Until then, the office had turned into a battlefield made of silence. People avoided eye contact. Some of the newer employees whispered when I passed by, like I was radioactive. My lunch mysteriously disappeared from the fridge 3 days in a row. My name was accidentally left off the invite list for an all-hands meeting I was expected to attend. They wanted me gone, but I wasn't giving them that satisfaction. Then, the first crack appeared. One morning, our CFO, Glenn Marbury, didn't show up to work. No one said anything. No company-wide email. Just gone. Like a magician's trick. 1 minute he was stomping down the halls. The next he was vapor. By noon, the whispers started. Glenn's been suspended. Legal's in a meeting with the board. I heard something about offshore accounts. No one said my name, but I could feel it in the air, like static before lightning strikes. Then came the IT lockdown. Suddenly, everyone in finance, procurement, and logistics was required to change their passwords, and access to certain systems was temporarily frozen. When I logged in, I noticed something strange. The Evermark Logistics profile, the vendor at the center of the fraud, was gone. Not deactivated. Deleted. Vanished from every record. Too late. I already had full PDF exports, dated and timestamped. Then came the email. Not from HR. Not from legal. From the external audit firm. Subject, confidential, immediate next steps. Mr. Vu, thank you for your submission and detailed records. We can confirm that an official investigation has been initiated into Raven Unfreight's vendor relationships and financial practices. Please do not discuss this matter with anyone at your workplace. We will be in touch shortly with instructions. R. Cole, Senior Investigator, Veritas Audit Group. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, for the first time in weeks, really exhaled. But I wasn't naive. I knew this meant open war inside the company. Not the kind fought with lawyers in boardrooms, the kind fought with petty retaliation, gaslighting, and quiet professional assassination. And I was right. That Friday, I was randomly selected for a desk audit. IT came and took my work laptop for performance diagnostics. I was told to work from a temporary station in the corner with limited access. No one talked to me. Even Sandra didn't make eye contact. That night, I found out from a friend in operations that 3 more employees had quietly been placed on administrative leave, all people connected to the fake vendor trail. Something big was about to blow. But before the dust could settle, I was called into HR again. This time, with a third-party representative present. And what they said next made my blood boil. The moment I stepped into the HR conference room, I knew something was wrong. The blinds were drawn. A pitcher of water sat untouched on the table. Sandra, my manager, was already there, seated stiffly, eyes locked on a folder she refused to open. Across from her sat a third-party HR compliance consultant, a woman named Monica Albright, who introduced herself with a hollow smile and the kind of legal-tinged tone that made every word feel like it had been rehearsed twice over. "Jason," she began, folding her hands, "this meeting is to address some serious concerns that have been raised about your recent conduct in the workplace." I almost laughed. Serious concerns? About me? She went on to describe an increasingly hostile presence in the office. Claims of paranoia, accusations toward fellow employees, and erratic behavior. She even mentioned a complaint about me creating a toxic work environment. None of it was true, but none of it surprised me. This was the playbook. When you can't get rid of someone legally, you character assassinate them. You wear them down, isolate them, and brand them as the problem. Then you wait for them to break. But I didn't flinch. I looked Monica straight in the eye. "Do you have specific incidents, dates, or evidence to support those claims?" She hesitated. Sandra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Neither of them answered. So I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick, manila folder of my own, my personal records. Printouts, emails, logs, timestamped notes from every incident they had thrown at me. I laid it flat on the table. "Because I do." Monica blinked. "This isn't a legal deposition, Mr. Vu." "No," I said calmly, "but it might become one." For a few seconds, the room was silent. Then, Monica cleared her throat and changed tactics. "We'd like to offer you a voluntary severance package. Full pay for 3 months, health coverage included. You walk away quietly, and we all avoid unnecessary conflict." There it was, the bribe. They wanted to be gone. Fast. Before the investigation reached the boardroom. Before anyone with real power connected the dots between my whistleblower report and the rod at the top. I almost took the offer. Almost. But then I remembered the call I got from Veritas, the external audit firm. The investigation was active, and from what I'd heard through the grapevine, it wasn't going well for Raventon Freight. The auditors had requested access to financial systems, historical vendor records, and even personnel files from the past 5 years. They were digging deep. So I smiled and said the most dangerous word in corporate America. "No." That word echoed through the room like a gunshot. Sandra looked stunned. Monica's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Maybe," I replied, "but at least I'm not complicit in a federal investigation." And with that, I stood up and walked out. The next day, the internal memo leaked. It was an anonymous tip sent to a journalist who covered white-collar crime in the corporate sector. The memo detailed suspicious vendor activity, whistleblower retaliation, and, though my name wasn't mentioned, someone described as an internal employee who attempted to report financial inconsistencies and was subsequently targeted by management. By Monday morning, Raventon Freight was in damage control mode. Legal scrambled. Phones rang off the hook. And suddenly, Sandra was on leave. A second executive quietly resigned. Glenn Marbury, the CFO, had already disappeared, but now whispers of an FBI inquiry had started making their way into the hallways. The best part? I hadn't even played my final card. Not yet. When I walked into the office on Tuesday, the energy had changed. No more side glances. No more whispered jokes or mysteriously missing calendar invites. Instead, silence. Controlled, sterile, fearful silence. The kind that spreads when people realize the system protecting them just cracked open. That morning, a federal investigator arrived. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. A tall man in a dark suit, briefcase in hand, walked into the executive wing accompanied by a representative from Veritas Audit Group, the firm I had submitted my report to. I watched through the glass walls as they entered the boardroom. The door closed behind them, and then the real unraveling began. Over the next 48 hours, 6 people were suspended. Not fired, yet, but pulled out of meetings, their computers confiscated, and access revoked. Glenn Marbury, the CFO who had gone on vacation, was now the target of a formal investigation for embezzlement and wire fraud. It turned out Evermark Logistics wasn't just a fake vendor, it was a front company tied to an account in the Cayman Islands. Worse still, he hadn't acted alone. Emails surfaced. So did transfer records. 3 department heads had been approving forged invoices in exchange for personal kickbacks, international flights, offshore payments, even real estate consulting fees. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos? Me. But this time, not as a scapegoat. As a protected witness. Veritas sent me an official letter acknowledging my role in uncovering the fraud. They informed Raven Unfreight that any retaliation against me would result in immediate legal escalation. That single email CC'd to HR, legal, and the CEO's office was like a shield. For the first time in months, I wasn't holding my breath at work. I was standing tall. But I wasn't done yet. See, I had options now. Job offers started appearing discreet at first. Recruiters who said they admired my ethics. One offer came from a direct competitor of Ravenon, with better pay, a remote option, and a team that wanted me for more than just my compliance skills. I didn't rush. I wanted to see this through. On my final day at Ravenon, yes, I chose to leave on my own terms. I cleaned out my desk calmly. No grand speeches. No finger-pointing. Just nods and a quiet goodbye. But just before I left, I slid one envelope under the CEO's office door. Inside was a printed copy of the original report I sent to Veritas, along with a handwritten note. This could have been an internal fix, but you chose silence. I chose truth. It's been 6 months since I walked out of Raven Unfreight. Glenn Marbury is facing federal charges. Several managers accepted plea deals. And the company? It's now under government monitoring. Their stock dropped 18%. Clients jumped ship. And the board of directors is scrambling to rebuild its image with promises of transparency and reform. As for me, I joined a new firm, smaller, but smarter. They hired me to build their financial oversight protocols from the ground up. And they made one thing clear from day one. We want people who speak up, not people who stay quiet. Sometimes, doing the right thing makes you the villain. But if that's the price of integrity, I'd rather be the enemy than the coward.